Hey class. So in this video, we're going to go over the basics of HTML and we're going to create our first simple website. So we are going to use this P5.js web editor. We'll go over there in just a second. One quick note, there is a tutorial here, and this is a little bit old. This was created by Professor Pincus in 2017. So the way that we used to do this, all the syntax and the language is still exactly the same, but the setup is very different. We used to create files on the computer and upload them to a server, and there's a few extra steps involved that we don't really need to do anymore. The technology for this has changed a lot in the past few years, and it's also changing very rapidly. So we've kind of been updating new technologies almost every semester, every year, or sometimes from semester to semester. So all of the text, all of the information is the same, but the platform is very different. So you wouldn't need to download the brackets editor. You wouldn't need to run a server. There's a lot of stuff in here that you don't really need to do anymore. So if you do take a look at this, that's fine. It's there for reference, but you will need to watch the video and see how things are set up to do it correctly for this semester. So just a quick note, because sometimes people catch up and use this tutorial, and then they end up with something that isn't quite right for the current class. Okay, so we're gonna get started. So we're just gonna go over here and go to the P5 editor. This editor, this is called an IDE, which is an integrated development environment. Write that down. So IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. And that's just a fancy way of saying in the past, our tools for creating a website were kind of separated in different places. We had like a text editor, then we had you would use something to create a server, so to make it seem like it's on the internet. We're actually on the internet now, so we don't have to do that step. But what most modern tools do is they use this, what we have here, which is an IDE. So everything is in one thing. So it all fits together and we can see it all at the same time. So that makes it a lot easier to use. So that's what the integrated part means. Development means, we're just developing a website. So this is the process of creating a website. And then the environment is just like where we are. This is the tools that we're using. So that's basically what that means. And the nice thing about the reason we're using P5, this is actually usually used for more coding with JavaScript. It's really more of a JavaScript-based platform. But I really like it because it's just very, very simple. It really only has the basic components that we need to create the website. It doesn't have any extra bells and whistles. There's a lot of other development environments that have lots of cool plugins and lots of cool stuff that you can do, and that's really useful once you kind of know the basics. But when you're getting to know the basics, that can be very confusing because it's going to start doing stuff for you that you don't actually understand why it's doing that. So we're going to use this for now as kind of a really easy, basic way to get started. Of course, if you have any questions about other environments, or if you've done some HTML before and you want to use something else that you've used, that's totally fine, as long as you use the basics. So I'm going to go over the interface a little bit, and then we'll get a project set up. So basically, it has a menu like up here, like you might see on an app on your computer. So the Chrome menu is a little bit different, but we have our own kind of file menu here. And then there's not that many options. As I mentioned, it's very bare bones. One thing you are going to do is you're going to want to sign up. So when you click sign up, you can use your Google account, or you can just sign in with a username and password. I'm going to log in because I already have an account, and Google will fill in the information for me. You'll notice a color change because I have a different theme. So if you click on this little gear over here, you can see your settings, and there's a few different themes. I tend to use the high contrast theme because I'm usually teaching when I'm using this, and it just makes it easier to see. I also will increase the text size a fair amount when I'm teaching, so it'll make it easier for you guys to see the text. You don't need to do that. You might prefer to have it, a little bit smaller so you can see more of the information. A couple other things, I usually leave autosave on. There's some automated stuff. I usually just leave all these defaults on. I wouldn't really, you can play around with those, but you don't need to. There's a couple of accessibility things. You can turn on a warning sound. You can use a text-based canvas with a screen reader. Just a couple of settings there if you need those. So then in the main interface, there's a name of the project here. It kind of fills in like a random name if you haven't named it yet. So I'm going to go ahead and name this. And so we're going to make a choose your own adventure website. This is just going to be our first basic template. So I'm just going to say first, or I'll call it this web intro. And I'll just put spring 2024. So you can really name it whatever you want. You can click on this thing here, and then you can go to file and save. And so it'll save files in the cloud. So if you go to file and go to open, you'll see when it loads, this is kind of the most recent project will be at the top. It's taking a little while to load. So, okay, there we go. So you can see the most recent project that I just created, and then you can see a lot of other projects. You can see I've made a lot of stuff in here. I use this a lot, but here we have the one at the top. You can also make collections. So this will be very useful. So you can add projects to different collections. You can see, collections that I've used for my classes in the past. So let's go ahead and create a collection for this class for this semester. So we're MMP Spring 2024, and I'll throw a link to this up on the Open Lab so you guys will be able to find this. And then I'm just going to add this project that I just created. That's kind of like a folder on your computer, but we call it a collection because it's in the cloud. You can also, there's a few other things in here. You can duplicate your project. This is something that actually be really useful because if I make a template, you can duplicate it on your own project, and then you can edit it from there. You can share, and so you have a couple options to share. You can embed the project somewhere. You can open it in full screen, and you can just share the link to this editor. You can download your project. You can look at examples. A lot of this stuff, the examples are going to be for JavaScript programming. We're not going to look at that quite yet because we're using it in a slightly different way. But that's all there. So then here, this big play button, you can preview your project. We're actually going to change a lot of stuff, so I'm going to hold off on that for now. Here is your text editor, and this is in the previous video when I talked about how we're kind of shifting paradigms. We're just going to be writing text for the most part in this section. So it's going to be very different than using the Adobe products or Audacity. It's not going to be pointing and clicking and dragging and moving stuff around. We're actually just going to be typing a lot and writing text, copying and pasting, and creating a document. And then the nice thing over here is that you have a preview. So you're going to see the result of what your website looks like on the right side when you make changes on the left side. So the default for P5 is to have this sketch.js file here. We're actually not going to use this today. So if I click on this little arrow, you can see our sketch files, and we're just going to be writing HTML today. So we're going to click over to HTML. You can see there's some default template HTML here, which we're going to change. And then for now, I'm actually not going to use any JavaScript or CSS. We're going to add this later. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete these files. So I'm just going to click on this little drop down and delete, just to simplify things, since we're just learning the basics today. And then this is actually really useful to create some HTML so you don't have to start from scratch every time, but I'm going to delete this so that we can talk about the basics of HTML, which is the point of this video. So I'm going to click in here and hit Command A and just hit delete. And we're just going to start from scratch, go over the basics, and then we'll build up our website. So I'm going to save my sketch here. And if I hit run here, we're not going to see anything over in the preview window. So we're going to start to add some stuff in here. I'm going to close this, but just remember that we are on index.html. All right, so let's get into writing some HTML. And HTML has a little bit of a tricky structure. It's a little bit similar to in our previous lesson when we were learning animation. I talked about nested animations. And this is something that's very common in markup and programming. We usually have what's called a tree structure or a node structure, where basically we have components that contain other components. And so the way that kind of works is that we have this thing that's called like our HTML document. And this basically contains all of the structure of our website. And so the way that we set this up is we have a beginning of our HTML document, and then we have down here, we have an end to the HTML document. And the way that we signify that is we put little brackets, and these are the two little angle brackets, or the greater than and less than sign. They're on your keyboard. I'll show you right there, those two little angle greater than less than signs next to your period and your comma. Those are the keys that we're talking about, and we use shift to get those. So we start with our HTML document here. So we say this is where our HTML starts. And everything that's in between here, starting here, and then down to here is what we want to be inside of our document. So HTML is the basic type of document, and then we're gonna have stuff in here, things like, you know, the title of the page, we're gonna have a headline or a header, we're gonna have some text and some images. All this stuff has to be in between these two sections. And pretty much every HTML element works like that. There are some exceptions, which I'll talk about, but pretty much every HTML element starts with this like block, and then it ends with a closing block. Inside of this is called a tag, and the tag describes what thing this is. And every website uses this, and we can actually look at this. One of the nice things about the web is that it's open source, so you can actually see what makes up every single website. So for example, let's take a look at this. Let's go to our first website. So I'm going to go to first website. We looked at this in the previous video, and you're going to see if I go to View in Chrome and go to Developer and View Source, you can actually see the HTML that made this website. This is very old HTML, so it looks kind of weird. It's not going to look that similar to what we're going to write today, but you can see it has the same basic setup where we have these like tags, and they have like a bracket here and a bracket here, and then you can see this is a little old, so it looks kind of weird, but for example, this title starts here and then it ends over here. So that's the basic structure that we're going to be working with. And every website still uses this. If we go to our OpenLab project, we can do the same thing. Oh, this is the wrong one. Let's go here. So if I go to View, go to Developer, and View Source, you can see more HTML. And we can go through all of this HTML and see, you know, what they're doing. We can copy and paste this if we want to. That's one of the nice things about the web is everything is open. So if you're curious how something works, you can look at the source, you can copy and paste the source, you can modify it. There's some rules about what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, but when it comes to just the basic structure of a website, you know, we can copy the structure. We can't copy the content, obviously, but when it comes to structure, it all works the same way. So we can look at how other websites are built, and then we can base that on our own website on that. Okay, so that's a couple examples. Let's take a look at writing our own document. So you might have noticed it up there, but one of the first things that we do is we tell the browser what type of document we're creating. And this is going to be one of the few types of tags that does not have a closing tag. So we use this exclamation point, and then for some reason this is written in all caps. I'm going to make my text a little bit bigger. For some reason this is written in all caps. I'm not really sure why, but that's just the standard. And then you just write HTML. And so this is the first tag. You actually don't really need this. Like, it'll be able to figure out what's going on without this, but technically this is what you should have. That's your doc type HTML. It's basically just telling the browser that this is an HTML document. This is just so it knows what is coming next. So then the next thing that we do is we define where our HTML starts and ends. So we have one tag that starts with a bracket. It has the name of the tag, which is HTML, and then the closing bracket. And then we close that section. And everything that goes inside here is what we're going to see on our website. So normally I will hit enter here, and notice that P5 does this thing for me where it actually moves the cursor over. This is just a stylistic thing that makes it easy to see what is inside of what. Since all of our sections have to be contained within previous sections, this just helps us visually see, but you don't actually need it. It doesn't really change the functionality. Another thing that you're going to notice as we're writing HTML in P5 in this editor, but in every editor, they have this thing called syntax highlighting. This will change the color of different things. That's why this is white and this is orange. And that's, again, it doesn't change the functionality, but it gives you a sense of if you're doing it right. If I have like an error somewhere, like if I misspell HTML, oops. Huh, that's interesting. That must be a new feature. I didn't know those were connected. Anyway, you will see the colors change. Like if I forgot a bracket here, that's not going to change the color, but it should. There we go. You can see it changes the color when my syntax is wrong. So that can be a good indicator. If you have a typo or something like that, you can undo that. And there's different themes, so you can see the colors are going to change depending on my different themes. Again, the color doesn't actually matter, but it's just a little visual indicator. So every website has two parts. One is called the head, and one is called the body. So you can think of it like a person. You have a head, you have a body, but in HTML, the head is something that we actually don't see. It defines certain properties about the page, and the body is where we put all the content that we actually want to see on the page. So for today, we're going to start with the head section, but we're not really going to put that much stuff in there until we start adding some other CSS and things like that. But for the body section, that's where we're going to mostly work today. So most websites have a head section and a body section. So let's go back to our source here. So you can see here's our HTML. This has another property which we'll go over in a second, but here's our head section, and it ends down here somewhere. You can see there's a lot of stuff in here. Let's see. And then the head section ends here, and then we have this body section, and that's where our content starts. Okay, so one thing that we will put in the head section today, and we'll put some other stuff in there later. This is the first thing that we'll actually see will kind of have an effect on the website, and this is the title. The title of the website is what you see on Google results. It's what you see in the top browser bar, so it's what you see up here, right here. But it's not actually anywhere on the page. It's just what we see here. This is the title, and that's what you see when you Google something. So if I Google this website, if I Google BMCC MMP 100 Spring 2024, you'll see that actually the first link that comes up is our course, and this title, that's what Google looks for, the title, and that's what it puts as the text for this link here. So let's add our title. So we make another tag. So again, every tag has both a closing and ending bracket, so it's contained inside there. And now we start to put content in between the two brackets. So you can see my head section starts here and it ends here. And then my title goes inside of my head section. So we're nesting these things inside of each other. So the title of my website is going to be Choose Your Own Adventure, and then I just close that title. So I use a slash and then the tag name, and then we close it. So we don't have any content on our page yet, but if I go to share and I go to full screen, you can see, oh, it actually shows, I forgot, that's kind of annoying. It doesn't actually show us the title because it's embedded in this like P5 thing. Okay, so don't worry about that for now. We'll see that later. Okay, but that's a good example of how a basic tag works. We have a beginning section, we have the content that we want in that section, and then we close that section, and then we move on to the next section. So let's start adding stuff into the body section, and this is where we'll see some actual changes. And actually for this part, because we haven't learned styling yet, I'm going to turn my theme back to light because I don't want the black background. So let's go back to the light theme just for today, until we learn some CSS. Okay, so in our body section, we're just going to start with a basic header. So this is like a title of the page. And in HTML, there's actually 6 levels of headers. So it's kind of like if you look at a website, like let's look at the New York Times for a second. When you look at the New York Times website, you can see there's lots of different levels of importance in the headers. There's like the main title of the website. Then there's like articles, have this header title. Then some articles are a little bit smaller. Each section kind of has a different level of importance. So in HTML, we have 6 basic levels of importance. And so our main header for the website is the H1, and they get smaller as you keep going. So for our H1, we're going to call this Choose Your Own Adventure. And, feel free to change the title to whatever you want your story. Or if you're working on a different type of project, that's fine as well. So now we see the first part of our website. So we have Choose Your Own Adventure. And if we go back to our preview window, open this up, you can see there's our content there. And so we can start to add content into our project. So we've got Choose Your Own Adventure. And now we're going to start to tell the story. So I'm going to make a paragraph. So a paragraph is what it sounds like. We just use P as a shorthand for paragraph. But a paragraph is just basically, a line of text in your project. So again, if we use the New York Times as an example, if I go into one of these articles, there's different sections. So you can see, it's making me log in. We do get the New York Times through CUNY, so that's kind of convenient. Although it doesn't seem to work. Okay, there we go. So as we go through the article, we have different paragraphs. So this section is a paragraph. This section is a paragraph. This is kind of broken up into lots of little updates. Let me see if I can find a better example. This is one about education, so that's kind of relevant. So yeah, you can see there's like individual paragraphs here. So one paragraph starts and ends, and they go to the next one. So if we're starting our story, we're just going to start very simple. I'm going to say, welcome to MMP 100. You can choose if you would like to be let's say an animator, designer, programmer, or what else do we cover? We do Photoshop. Let's just say Illustrator. Okay. So this is just an example. You should write your story about whatever you want to write about, but I'm just using the class as kind of a basic template. Okay, so there we go. So we have our first paragraph. Notice our website is going to look pretty boring until we start adding CSS styling, but we'll do that next week. We just want to get the basics down first. So one thing to notice, I can change the size of the preview window. So if you want to see it at different sizes, you can do that. Again, another thing that we can't change right now is the layout of the page. Everything is just going to go from top to bottom. That's another thing we can change when we add some styles. But we've got our basic paragraph, and this is starting to look, we've got some more information here. And so again, notice that we have this header. Inside the header, we have this text, and then we close the header. That's why there's a gap between where this header ends here and the paragraph begins here. If I didn't have those, so for example, if I took out this closing H1 and I run the site again, now the paragraph thinks that it's part of the H1 because I didn't end the H1. And so it still works because HTML is trying to make the website, even if you programmed it wrong, but it doesn't look the way it's intended to look. So that's why we need to close one section and then we open the next section. And you can have as many of these as you want. So we can have another paragraph that just says, some other stuff. So we can say choose wisely. So we can kind of make this a little bit more dramatic. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give the user a choice of which path they want to go down. Okay. So those are some of the basics. There are a lot of HTML tags. I'm not going to cover all of them today right now, but if you go to MDN and type in HTML, you will see MDN is the Mozilla Developer Network. They're sort of the authority on a lot of the different components of our web languages, HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And you can see they have a list of our tags here. So you can see the head, title, body. There's a whole bunch of different tags. And if you want to see all of them, you can go to the reference over here and go to HTML elements. And you'll see there's lots and lots of different types of tags. Again, we're not going to be able to use all of them, but we are going to learn some of the basics, and we'll learn more as we go. Okay, so let's add a little bit more. So we've got choose your own adventure. We've got welcome to MMP 100, and now we're going to set up this choice. And so we're basically just going to give the user some links, and those are going to go to other pages, and that is the hypertext component of HTML, hypertext markup language. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to do an example of a couple, but you will be able to add more to it on your own. So let's add in a new paragraph. And then this is another thing that happens a lot. So notice that my H1 and my paragraph, they're all inside the body section. Sometimes we have sections within a section. So if I want to add a new paragraph, and let's say I want to be an animator. So we're going to write this from the user perspective. So the user is going to say, I want to be an animator. So if we just write that text, you can't click on it. It's not a link, but we can make it a link by wrapping it in an anchor tag. Anchor is the HTML word for link. It anchors the text to a place. And the way that we can do that is using another bit of HTML that's inside of our paragraph. So, it could be on its own, but the paragraph kind of makes it a new section, and then we can add an anchor tag. And you can really add these everywhere. If you look at, most websites, let's look at our class site as an example. There are links inside of the paragraphs. There are links up here. All of these things that we can click on are links. So we're just going to create our first link. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting the whole thing inside of a link, and then we're going to move it just to see that as an example. So to make a link, I'm starting inside my paragraph. You have to be careful here. You don't want it to be in here, like in this area. You want it to be in between the paragraph and the content, the text. So I'm going to put in a new bracket, and this is just A. So it's just really simple. It just stands for anchor, which is our link. And we're going to wrap this entire bit of text inside this A section. So then we're going to use what's called an attribute. An attribute is something that goes inside of the HTML tag that changes the way it works. So right now we have said that this is a link, but we haven't said where we want it to go. And so inside this A, I'm going to make a space. And so if I add a space in there in between the two brackets, I can add an attribute. So the attribute for this one is href. That just means hypertext reference. It's just a shorthand for where this link is going to go. I can hit equals, and then I have to put the value, the where the page is inside of quotation marks so it knows where it starts and ends. So there's a lot of little bits that make the website work the way it's supposed to. So this doesn't exist yet, but I'm going to create a page. Right now we just have index.html in our files, and every website has an index.html. That's the main page that the website always goes to first. But now we can go to another page, and I'm going to call this animator.html. And we're actually going to move this around in a second, but I just want to show you a basic version of this first. So now if I run my website again, and by the way, I'm rerunning the website just by hitting Command Enter on my computer. There's some shortcuts in P5 that make it a little bit easier to use, so I don't have to move my mouse over and hit play. But that's basically what I'm doing. So notice now our text is blue. It's become a link. And if I click on it, it says that this page doesn't exist because I haven't created it yet. But that's okay. We're gonna make it, and so it'll work. So let me run this again, and we see it here. So let's say I only want the animator text to be the link. I can move this, so I have to take the whole A tag, and I have to make sure I get everything in between the brackets. And I'm going to hit Command Copy or Command X to cut. And then I'm just going to move to the beginning of Animator and paste it there. So now just that Animator text is a link. So whatever's inside of the anchor tag will be part of our link. And I could make it, I could stretch it across the whole website. I could put it wherever. So let's move this A tag here so it doesn't include the dot at the end. Again, this is just a personal preference. This is how I want it to look, but you could make it look however you want. And so we can make as many of these links as we want. I'm just going to copy and paste this section and just change a couple of things. I haven't made these pages yet, but I will in a second. So let's change the second option to designer. And so now I'm going to change this to designer.html. Okay, so when I run this, now we have two options. Obviously, neither of them actually work, but we're going to make those pages in a second. Okay, so let's add in our new pages so that we can actually link to them. And one thing that you might want to do is copy and paste this whole section so you don't have to repeat it again. But you can also just type it out again. So if we want to add a new file to link to, I can go to Sketch Files and click plus here and say create a file. And I'm just going to create the two files that I've made so far. So I have animator.html and I'm going to make designer.html. So I want the same basic HTML template. So you could copy and paste, like I could go here and just copy this section, or I could copy the whole thing. I'm just going to hit Command C and then go here and Command V, and then I'll just delete the content from the previous example. Or I could leave the header. So now I can start from scratch on animator.html. And this is where it starts to get confusing. So just make sure that you are keeping track of what file you're actually editing. Sometimes you might edit a file, but you have the wrong file open because they all kind of look the same. And so just be careful about that. Okay, so I'm not going to write out my whole story here because it'll take a long time to do that. You guys can spend more time on that on your own. But what I'm going to do is just add a couple comments and then link back to the page. So in your story, you could have like lots of branches and lots of different things happen. But I'm just going to demo a couple things. So let's say you choose to be a designer, and usually with a choose your own adventure story, you have like good endings and bad endings. So let's just for the sake of an example, I'm not saying that animators are good or bad or designers are good or bad, but I'm just using an example. So let's say you choose to be a designer and a dragon eats you. So this is just a silly example, but this is our bad ending. And so then we'll give them a chance to start over. So I'll add another paragraph, and I'm just going to link back to the original page. So I'll say href equals index.html, and then I'll link back to, I'll say start over. And then I like putting the period at the end. You could put it wherever you want. And so now we've got a link back. Okay, so now if I run this again, if I click on designer, see I have this text that I just added here. I didn't really use correct grammar here. So if we choose to be a designer, we say you choose to be a designer and a dragon. Uh-oh, it didn't save. So make sure to save. I have it on autosave, but sometimes it doesn't go fast enough. Okay, so you choose to be a designer and the dragon ate you. So let's start over. We go back to the beginning. Okay, so that's very exciting. Let's do the same with the animator. This will be our good ending. So I'm going to add a new paragraph. And then inside my paragraph, I'm going to say you choose to be an animator and you win let's say, what could you win? You could win the Oscar. We just had the Oscars recently. You win an Academy Award. Okay, so that's our good ending. And now let's go, back to the beginning. So we can just say start over. But I forgot my link. Let's put in our link. So we have href index.html. And we'll say start over here. So then I'll close my link tag and close my paragraph tag. Okay, so now I can go to here, start over, or I can go to here and start over. Okay, so we have two more things we're going to cover, then, we'll leave the rest of it for next time because there is a lot more to do, but we just want to get started nice and simple. You will make a lot of mistakes as you're building your first website, so feel free to email me. There's a lot of typos, so if you forget something simple, like let's say I even forget just that one bracket, you don't really see any difference here, but you might do something. Let's see if I can break something. See if I forget that. Oh, I'm on the animator page. That's why I didn't see that. Okay, so now see I made this mistake here and it doesn't look right. It still kind of works, but you just have to be careful about the syntax. Really little, you can miss really simple little problems. There is a website that will help you with this. This is called the HTML Validator. And this will just read through your HTML and it'll tell you if you've made any mistakes. So we can go to direct input. I'm gonna move this over here. You can copy your entire page and then paste it right in here and then click check. And it'll tell you if you missed anything. So I have some warnings. I'm not really that worried about warnings, but let's see what this says. So you're supposed to have a language attribute in the HTML. I didn't put that in there because we hadn't learned what an attribute was yet, but maybe we'll do that next time. But anyway, if you don't see any red stuff, that's good. Like if I had missed like a closing bracket or something like that, you would see these red errors and it would show you where the errors are missing. And a lot of these errors are caused by the original error. So when you fix that one, it'll fix the other ones. But anyway, the validator website will really help you know if you've written everything correctly. In P5, there's also a nice tool called TidyCode. So if I have some of my code over here or over here, I have weird syntax or formatting, I can go up here and click TidyCode and it's just gonna put everything in the right place. So that's really useful as you're editing as well. Okay, so I want to cover two more things. One is the location of the different pages, and then the other is we can also add an image to the page. So right now, all of my files are in one folder, and so I can link directly to them just by using their name here. But most websites have lots of pages, and so we end up having to create more complex URLs. And so as we add more pages, we want to be more organized. So what I'm going to do is make a folder and go over how to do this. So we're going to create a folder. I'm going to call this pages. And we're just going to actually put our animator file into the page. So I'm going to rename this. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to put pages / at the beginning. That basically says I want it to be in the pages folder. And so now we can see that animator. Oh, no, but didn't do that. That might be in a different program. I don't know, maybe I can't move this. Okay, I don't think that it'll let me move this file the way I want to. So what we'll do is we'll just recreate it. That's fine. Okay, so inside my pages section, I'm gonna recreate those files. So I'm gonna create a file called animator.html. So you can imagine this would be useful if we had 20 pages or 50 pages. We wouldn't want to all have them in one big folder. So I'll just go to animator.html and copy this and then paste it in here. And then I'll go to designer.html and copy this and paste this in here. You also don't have to do this. I like to be organized, but as long as your thing works, then you don't need to worry about it. So I'm going to delete these previous versions. And so now what's going to happen is if I run this site and I click on Animator, now it doesn't exist because now it's inside this pages folder. And so it's easy to get there. All I do is put pages as the folder name at the beginning of my href. So I say pages, and then slash is how I say this is a folder. So it's going to go into the pages folder first, and then it goes into the animator page. So now if I run this, we see the animator page. Now we're going to have to fix this, because when I say start over, there's no index.html inside pages. So now that we're inside the folder, we have to go back. And there's a special way to do that. So I'm going to go to animator.html. So if I want to go back from the pages folder back to the main folder, I just say .. slash. So that's just a shorthand in computer programming that says go back one folder. So now if I run the project, I can go to animator and go back to index. And this is just a better way to kind of organize the site. So you can have lots of pages, you can have different types of pages and different folders, and you'll be able to move between them. So then for designer, let's do the same thing. I'm going to say pages/designer, and then we'll go into the designer.html and put a .. slash here. And so now if we run the site, we can go to animator, or we can go to designer. Okay, so that's some basic linking. For your project, you can add your own story, or if you don't want to do a story type project, you can make a website that just has information or something else that you're interested in. The last thing we're going to cover is adding an image, so we can just add a little bit of media into our project. So I'm going to make another folder for images, because we want to keep things nice and organized. And I'm just going to upload my self-portrait just to use as an example. So I'm going to go to plus and go to upload a file. And then you can drag and drop onto this box, or if I click here, it'll open up my computer finder or file explorer. Go to my documents and go into my self-portrait. And I'm just going to use my lizard self-portrait, or my pigeon lizard self-portrait here. And so that's going to upload this file. So now it's part of my website and I can link to it. Until we learn some basic CSS, it is going to look a little weird because we can't really change like the size of it or anything else like that. And I actually accidentally uploaded it to the main folder. So that's a good thing to review. If I want to upload it to my images folder, I have to click on this drop down here. So let's do that one more time. And so linking to an image is similar as linking to a page, but we use a different tag because we actually want to embed the media inside our page. So I'm going to go to my index.html, and just as an example, I'm going to make a new line here. So after my first paragraph, or my last paragraph, but before I close the body section down here, to link an image, I'm just going to use the image tag. But the image doesn't have any text content inside of it, so we don't actually need a closing tag. We just need another attribute. So just like our href attribute that we used here, the image has a similar attribute, but it's a little bit different. We use src for source. And then our source is going to be the images folder. So we're going to put images slash. So slash means folder. And then my self-portrait has a long name. I'm just going to rename this something a little shorter. So I'm just going to call this self.jpg. So I'll call this self.jpg. You don't have to do that. I just like to keep things a little bit simple. And then you just close that. The image actually has one extra attribute, so you can add multiple attributes. And the extra attribute is called alt text. That's used for screen readers, because people who use accessibility tools like screen readers, they won't be able to see the image, but their screen reader will read all the content. And so we use an alt text to explain to people who can't see the image what they would be looking at. So I'm just going to put lizard and pigeon hanging out. This text will also show up if for some reason the image doesn't load. That's not such an issue these days, but back when we had slow internet connections, this would often happen. So you'd at least be able to see a description of what the image was supposed to be. So now we can run this, and now we can see our image embedded on our web page. And if we go over here to share and go to full screen, there you're going to see the whole web page with the image. And if we go to animator and designer, we can move around in our website. So that's probably a lot. There's a lot that we've covered just in these very, very basic intro. So if that feels like, kind of a lot of information, that is not unusual. This is a very new paradigm, so don't be too worried if it feels a little bit confusing. Let me know if you want to go over stuff in office hours, or you can send me your website and I'll take a look at it. I'm gonna link to this in the YouTube video, so you'll be able to take a look at my code. And remember, if you're logged in and you go to File and Duplicate, you can actually duplicate my project, and then you can just play around and change the text and do that rather than starting from scratch. I do recommend starting from scratch because it'll help you get used to typing and understanding, that process. But you can also use this as a template and get started from there. So that's it for this one. In next week, we'll go over a little bit more HTML, and then we'll also add CSS styling. So you'll be able to add colors and typography and make the website look a little more interesting.